Hello and welcome to Tai'Shar, a Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Sam.
I'm Will.
We're here again to discuss Eye of the World for the first time. Not really.
Whether you're reading it for the first time or you're a longtime listener that's joining us, walking it through, we're going to have some new content in here, hopefully a few laughs that will keep it interesting. So thanks for bearing with us if you're one of our longtime listeners. And if you're joining us for the first time, welcome.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a little summary of the books. I got the kind of principal summary portion of this episode. Sam's going to be adding color commentary, and then we kind of alternate and change up who's doing what. So we'll start off with prologue of Eye of the World. Now, if this is your first time reading, make sure you read the prologues.
We should clarify here, we're talking about the prologue, the actual prologue, and not the added prologue that was in the split apart books doesn't really add much of any content. I almost feel like Robert Jordan just put it in there because he got so much criticism about the prologue being unrelated to the book. I mean, these characters is like, okay, fine, I'll give you a prologue with the characters that are in the book.
Right.
And it's just not much happening there. It's just about Egwene and Perrin. You're not missing much if you haven't read it. If you want to go back and read it, go back and read it. But you've been warned. Nothing happens.
Yeah, you don't need to read that one. That one, as Sam said, was added later when the book was split in two for a attempt to market it as a YA kind of book.
Added later, and yet the title is earlier.
Yes.
Anyway,
it's strange. The prologue entitled Dragon Mount, which is the original prologue, is not optional. And none of the prologues are. They all have important details. And this one is one of the most important, even though, as Sam was saying, it has characters in it that don't really appear in the rest of the book.
Right.
We start with a scene that takes place about 2,000 years before the main action, which it doesn't tell you that explicitly. You kind of have to read the whole book and kind of get that through other parts of the narrative.
At first, you're like, Lews Therin. Okay, so this is going to be my main character, and we're going to spend a lot of time with him.
Yeah, we're going to get to know this guy. So, yes, Lews Therin Telamon, who is known as the Dragon. He's wandering around his palace, clearly out of his mind, having recently killed everyone around him, including his beloved wife, Ilyena. By the way, big fan of the audiobooks. Michael Kramer.
Yes.
And this one,
Michael Kramer, yeah.
Yeah. He gives a really dramatic Ilyena all during this. So Lews Therin seems oblivious to what he's just done, and he's kind of just walking around wondering where everyone is, even though there's bodies all around that he doesn't seem to see. Mm-hmm. There's lots of details here that we could explain further to help you understand the scene that
this
really
massively goes over everyone's head. I mean, so much of it, just so many little details. Like if you go back and read it after reading the whole series, like, oh, this is interesting. Okay,
right, yeah. The first time through, it's kind of especially when you come to the first chapter, and first several chapters seem to have nothing to do with this.
Yeah, right.
But we'll give you just a little bit of context, maybe to help you out. I'm trying to keep it to a bare minimum.
Right.
So sometime back, Lews Therin was involved in a successful attempt to reseal the Dark One's prison. And if you can't tell the Dark One, that's the bad guy.
He's a devil, kind of.
Yeah. And if you can't tell that by his name, then this is gonna be a difficult book series for you.
Yeah.
Lews Therin, he's a magic user, and because he and his other male channelers, that's what they call the magic users, used Sidene.
Yeah, let's be clear. It's when I didn't listen to these audiobooks at first. I read them. So I read it as Satan, like Satan, for the entire series. And I heard the audiobooks and Sidene, like, okay. There's not an E at the end there, so it doesn't look like sardines to me, but okay, fine. RJ, you have your pronunciations. We'll go with that.
Right. So, the one power, which is the thing from which people can channel, people who can channel.
With more sparkly lights.
Yes. And it has a male half and a female half, and the male half is Sidene, the female half is Sidar. They access it, and that gives them the ability to do magical stuff. Well, when this group of men that sealed off the Dark One's prison used Sidene, so the Dark One touched Sidene and tainted it, and now there's there's this taint forever on the male half of the one power, which means that any man who channels will eventually go mad and start killing everyone around them. And at this point in history, in the prologue, the world is just starting to discover this.
Oily taint. Delicious.
Yes. The taint, the Dark One's taint is one of our favorite phrases. Anyway, so random bad guy appears to
Billy Zane.
Yes.
If you're not familiar, there was an awful pilot that was made of the Wheel of Time. I don't know. Was that like a couple of years ago? It was like 2007, 8, 9? I don't know.
Yeah, it was a while back now. But yeah, we mentioned it a few times in different episodes, and it was just awful. It was so that Red Eagle Entertainment could keep the rights because the contract, blah blah blah. They aired it on Sci-Fi Channel at like 3 a.m. They knew it was terrible.
Right. They were just trying to keep the rights. Right.
Yeah. And yeah, it's so bad that, no joke, the guy who directed it died in a car accident shortly after making it. And
cursed.
And I feel like it was karma or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway. I probably shouldn't joke about that. That poor guy. Anyway, so this guy appears, and it's a little confusing the first time you read this because you're like, oh, is this the Dark One, or this is the big bad guy, right? Because he's showing up to taunt Lews Therin. And no, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of context again here that you don't exactly get. This guy actually is a former ally of Lews Therin, whose name used to be Elan, or Elan. I'm not sure how that one is supposed to be pronounced. But he's now known as Ishamael the Betrayer. The Betrayer of Hope, I believe, is his full title. So he's part of this group of these powerful channelers who joined forces with the Dark One, who call themselves the Chosen, but the rest of the world refers to them as the Forsaken. That's who this guy is. He's kind of one of the lieutenants of the Dark One. Ishamael briefly heals Lews Therin of his madness, which is really just out of cruelty. So he can see that he's killed his family. Boom goes the dynamite. Lews Therin loses it and channels so much of the power because he's so in such huge despair. He not only kills himself, but this amount of power rearranges the geography of the whole world, starting with the point where he is standing, creates an enormous volcano, which later becomes to be known as Dragon Mount, hence the name.
And presumably Ishmael skedaddles.
Yes.
Well, this happens.
Right. Somehow, yeah.
I feel like this show can, like, convey a lot of this just by making him look like a bad guy.
Right. Right, exactly.
Give him a cape. I don't know.
Right. This incident is what's known as the breaking of the world, and you hear it referred to a lot throughout the series. And it happened. We're really reading history at this point for the main course of the book, because then when we go to chapter 1, at that point we are 2,000 years later. And which they don't tell you that. So you're
Neil Stephenson pulled this trick in Seven Eves, science fiction novel about the moon crashing into the earth and other things. And it's like you get to the end of the book, it's like, well, that was good. And then there's like 5,000 years later. And, and he has like a little booklet, like a little novella that he's written 5,000 years in the future, and it's awful. Up till then, it's a great book. That novella is real bad. But yeah. Robert Jordan does not tell us we're 2,000 years in the future. Good point.
Yes, yeah, and you kind of have to pick that up. So yes, so we are about 2,000 years later. We are also in a remote rural region known as the Two Rivers, and we're introduced to Rand and Tam Althor. Rand is a tall, redheaded kid, which is unusual in this part of the world. But his father is tall, and his now deceased mother was redheaded. So, no one thinks too much about it.
I would like to say that the book opens with a paragraph that is at the beginning of every book. The wheel of time turns, ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Yada 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 yada. And a wind rises. The wind is not the beginning, neither beginnings or endings, etc. But it was a beginning. They always do that. He always does that. Brandon Sanderson continues that. So it's just a nice little thing to look forward to.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of helpful because it's like, oh, hey, here's the main course of the book now.
Right. We're through the prologue because some of the prologues of these books are massive.
They're huge
novels in their own right.
Right. And so you can, yeah. And I mean, like, if you're listening to the audiobook, you'll have listened for like 4 hours and then it'll be,
Right.
and a wind rose. The wind was neither, what, and you're like, wait, what?
I've commuted back and forth to work 4 or 5 times.
Right, exactly. So, yes, Rand and Tam are walking along this road where that wind rose up, and Rand sees a creepy looking guy. And when he calls his dad's attention to it, creepy looking guy's gone. He's just not there. And Tam's like, must be seeing things, And so they enter Emmons Field, which is the village located kind of in the middle of the Two Rivers region, and their farm is actually outside of Emmons Field, but this is their hometown. So they come into town where Rand meets up with his buddy Matt Cawthon, planning some prank involving a badger or what, I don't know. It's
vaguely reminiscent of something from Lord of the Rings involving hobbits.
This is, you're like, oh, this is either the Merry or the Pippin.
Yeah, exactly.
Through this conversation, it's discovered that Matt saw the same strange man that Rand did out on the road, but his father didn't believe him either.
Yeah, let's not mince words. I mean, very much like this book is a bit of the Fellowship of the Ring, but slightly with names changed, and like the whole series is not like that. But there's lots of moments in this book you're like, this could have been lifted from Tolkien,
right?
No doubt about it.
Oh, and well, I mean, there's no doubt that it was intentional, both as a tribute, but also as a way to sell it, because
yeah, exactly.
People could start in on it and be like, oh, I get this.
This is familiar.
Like, yeah. And so, you have this guy on the road who is, referred to as a dark rider. And so you're like, oh, yeah, it's like the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings. So, yeah. And you start to feel like, oh, this is a pastoral setting, a lot like the Shire. And you have a mischievous young man. And it starts to feel very, very similar.
These are like hobbits, but they're taller.
Yes, exactly. So, by the way, in this part of the book, tomorrow is supposed to be a festival. They're called Beltane or Winter Night, and there are going to be fireworks and a gleeman, which is a real big deal. He's sort of a traveling bard who tells stories and sings songs and juggles and does acrobatics and tricks, and they're very rare in this part of the world because they tend to stick to larger cities and everything. So it's a real treat that they're getting a gleeman. So, on to chapter 2, Strangers. In Strangers, we meet some strangers.
Stranger things. Yeah.
Who've come to town. One's named Moraine, and she's dressed like royalty, which is sticks out like a sore thumb.
I'm going to continue to point out my internal pronunciations, and my internal pronunciation was very much Moraine. I don't know why. That's how I read it in my head.
I would give you the excuse of Harry Potter, but this came out first, so
True. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I had that in my head from the very beginning.
Yes. Moraine is, she's an unusual sight in this place. She's dressed really well and everybody thinks she's noble. She's also traveling with a man who's kind of looks like her bodyguard. There's a guy named Lan, which upon my first reading, by the way, it was like, okay, Rand, Tam, and Lan. Not a lot of diversity in the use of vowels in this.
No.
Lan carries a sword, which is kind of unusual in these parts. People don't have.
It looks like he has 2 on like the cover of the original novel.
Yeah,
I don't know what the other one is, but yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Not important.
He's also wearing a cloak that shifts in colors to camouflage him, which, in looking back, I was like, why was he wearing his color shifting cloak at this point? But anyway,
I guess the people in Emmons Field would not know what that was.
Right. I guess so. Anyway, it's pretty nifty. So Moraine gives Matt and Rand some silver coins, saying that she might need them to help her out with some stuff later on. So on to chapter 3, The Peddler, where we meet a peddler. Look, we're being pretty consistent with these names here.
Touche.
And that's going to continue. So Padan Fain, who's a peddler, he rolls into town. This guy's a regular here. He usually brings news of the outside world. He's pretty popular. When he rolls up, everybody's like, hey, what's the latest hot goss? And he's like, oh, let me tell you, off in the far off lands, there's a war going on. Ooh. And it has caused by someone claiming to be the dragon reborn.
Hmm.
And this is apparently a thing nowadays, because there is some kind of prophecy that says that one day Lews Therin Telamon will be reborn and show up again and either destroy the world or save it. It's kind of vague.
Right. That remains to be true for a lot of the series.
Right. And yeah, these prophecies are like, I mean, like it's like, hey, can you give us a hint, because those are like opposite.
Yeah.
Oftentimes nowadays, men will claim to be him and to raise up an army and gather support and start taking over places. Some can even channel, which of course we know Lews Therin could channel. So it seems likely that would be a pretty good indicator that they would be, a reborn version of Lews Therin. But nowadays, because of the taint on the male half of the one power, any man who is discovered to be able to channel is either killed or gentled, which means they're cut off from the one power. And then usually they kind of lose the will to live after that. So, so that's that. Again, a little more context for you there. So in these chapters, we also meet Egwene, Rand's crush, who has just been given permission to braid her hair by the women's circle, signifying that she is an adult now. This is a Two Rivers thing. And we also meet Nynaeve, who is the village wisdom. And she's only like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. I guess we could look up the exact amount.
Yeah, I figure like the main cast is, 16 or 18, somewhere around there. And Nynaeve is like 20s, somewhere in 20s.
Like mid-20s maybe.
Yeah, maybe 24, something like that.
But despite being relatively young, she has risen to this high rank in the village as the healer. She seems to have some knack to it, and she's one of the leaders of this women's circle. She also helps to predict the weather. That's all part of what a wisdom does. They heal and advise and predict the weather.
Oh yeah, just a weatherman.
Right, weather lady.
Yeah.
Finally, we meet Perrin, another one of
Samwise Gamgee. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But, I mean, he's not too much of it, but I mean, maybe a little
broad
bit.
strokes.
Broad strokes. Yeah, you do start feeling that way just in this book.
Yeah, right. 100% just in this book. Only when Moriani has a staff.
You're right. Exactly. Yeah, so one of Rand's friends here he also saw the Black Rider that Matt and Rand saw. So in chapter 4, which is called the Gleeman, we meet a Gleeman. Yo, look at that. Yes. So Tom is his name, Tom Droll Marilyn. He dazzles everyone with his dazzling dazzleness. He's got a real big personality. He's a big performer. And
Rand notices he has blue eyes, but almost all people he knows have brown eyes.
Right. Rand
himself has blue eyes.
Yeah. Another unusual thing in this part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So Tom is telling stories and being all interesting until Moraine and Lan show back up. And suddenly there's this tension between Tom and Moraine that is kind of difficult to understand. Tom's kind of like, I don't know about this lady. And so then Tam returns and kind of says, hey, Rand, we're headed back home. And he explains that they had a meeting with the village council, and it turns out several boys did indeed see this mysterious rider.
He was like, we gotta go check on the farm.
Yeah, so we're going to head home and spend that night there. They may have stayed in town and gotten ready for Beltane tomorrow. So,
and can we just say, like, not giving spoilers, but just this situation is very strange in the context of the books. This is not how this rider would normally behave.
Right.
We will go into that further, but it is just kind of like, really, come on, guys.
Right. Yeah.
RJ was still figuring things out at this point a little bit.
Right. And it's a combination of he probably didn't have his lore totally laid out. Sure. He was intentionally, I think, trying to make it feel, as we've said, Tolkien-esque.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So in chapter 5, Winter Night, and this is where the spaghetti hits the fan. So
delicious.
Rand and Tam head back home, and Tam surprises his son by bringing out a sword that Rand has never even seen. He's like,
this would get a sword, man.
Yeah, he's like, whoa, Dad, where'd you get that? This would be like if you had a single dad who's like real quiet and kind of gentle, but then suddenly pulls a gun out from under his bed. You're like, whoa.
I did that at Christmas. I don't know, like, my wife was at church to sing, and I had her family in town. So I don't know, like, we got to talking about it. I was like, oh yeah, I should pull out the shotgun that my granddad gave me. And he's like, you have a shotgun? And I pulled it out, and he like offered to buy it from me. It was a weird day. I was like, no, man, I think I'm gonna hold on to it.
Yeah, similar family heirloom type situation.
Yeah.
Well, Tam throws some frozen dinners into the microwave and puts on an episode of Forged in Fire. And the door busts open, and a Wookalar is standing there. Now, if you get the Wookalar reference, that's a reference to the 1980 Don Knotts classic comedy horror mystery Private Eyes, then please email us at stuff@tsmpodcast.com. I want to be your friend. If you're also a single female adult and your hair is brightly colored, then I would like to bring you home to my folks because you're a keeper. All right. Anyway, it's not a Wookalar. Although if you look up the YouTube Wookalar,
I am doing so now.
Yeah, you'll see a scene with that. But it's that actually is a great movie. It's a fun one. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now that you say that, that's great.
Yeah, you see it, right?
Well played. Yeah, well played. He's got a wig and everything. It's great.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, no, it's not a Wookalar. It's a Trolloc, which basically it's what happens when you throw a bunch of animals into a blender with Macho Man Randy Savage. And it's an orc in this world.
It's Bebop and Rocksteady.
Yes. Also. Yeah, Bebop and Rocksteady rolled into one. Good call. Anyway, some stuff happens. Rand talks to a Trolloc, accidentally kills him. The talking to a Trolloc thing, another unusual thing that happens.
I can't think of another time when it happens, but it may happen.
It may happen someplace else.
There's a lot of books.
Yes. So Tam is injured, and Rand escapes with his injured father, dragging him through the woods back to Emond's Field. So Chapter 6, The Westwood, not to be confused with Westwood Studios, creator of the Command and Conquer series of real-time strategy games.
Red Alert! Oh man, that's a good game.
Yeah.
I think they did like a remaster recently. The Warcraft 3 remaster is almost universally reviled, but at the same time, the Command and Conquer Red Alert and Red Alert 2 remaster recently came out also. I think in the past year, people love it. I've been meaning to try. Have not.
I'm a big fan of the Red Alert series. Anyway,
I also had a Blade Runner game, Runner point and click adventure game. That was great. Oh, I would love to play that again. Golly.
Yeah, they had a Blade Runner. They did Dune. Also, they had a Dune game that was a real-time strategy game. That was their first real-time.
Blade Runner is on GOG. I'm gonna have to get it.
Yeah.
Kind of excited.
And by the way, if these kinds of asides bother you,
I don't know what to tell you.
If you just started listening to us, I'm sorry to say you probably need to get off this train at this stop.
Yeah.
Because this track winds through all sorts of geek culture regions.
It does.
Anyway, the main thing that happens in this chapter is that Tam is having a fever dream and starts mumbling about finding Rand as a baby on the side of Dragonmount. And obviously this is a pretty big shock to Rand, but he's not sure if it's like real or just because Tam's lost some blood or if he's actually unpunked and Ashton Kutcher's going to jump out and be like, gotcha! That reference is a little dated now. Now, kids, back in the day, Ashton Kutcher had a TV show called Anyway, so Rand keeps dragging his dad through the woods. So, we wonder if they're ever going to get out of the woods until we see the title of Chapter 7, which is Out of the Woods. So, gosh, and they say
we have to go.
They say we're spoilery. Now you were going to do an Into the Woods. Here's the thing. I wrote it out. Out of the woods, Rand goes to get some healing to see his bros out of the woods, but even so, he has to make the journey.
I should read the outline. I'm over here on GOG.com.
No. You just start playing Blade Runner over there, dude.
I know, right?
By the way, that's not the first time I've made that joke, and if you're listening for the first time, then it's not the last time you'll get to hear it.
Exactly.
So Rand finds out that all of Emmons Field was under attack by Trollocs in the night, and he goes to Nynaeve to heal Tam, but she quickly says he's too far gone and there's nothing she can do. Plus, she's busy healing other people, so buzz off. And for some reason, Rand's like, you know what? The mayor of Emmons Field, he'll know what to do. And I just appreciate his confidence in his local leadership.
I know, right?
Sam and I grew up in the same town, and I liked our mayor and when we were living back there and home. But if my dad was dying in the middle of the night, it would never have occurred to me.
Probably not who you would call.
Yeah. To be like, hey, can you help him out?
I think Andrew's dad was the city manager, I want to say.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
I remember when he resigned, and they had that was such a huge deal in our town that they put it on the front page in the Titanic sinks font. It was like
nice.
City manager resigns. I'm like, oh man, must not be much going on.
I know, right?
Okay, so they go to the Wine Spring Inn where Mayor Bran and his family live, and of course, he can't do anything. And Bran just mentions that, hey, turns out Moraine, she's a magic user, which is called an Aes Sedai here in this world. She used lightning to fend off Trollocs.
Maybe she can use lightning on you.
Right, yeah.
That'll take care of Tam real quick.
and by her warder, which is Lan's he's a warder, which is an Aes Sedai's ever-present ride or die companion, and apparently he fought off the Trollocs like he was 10 men or 100 men or 1,000 men. I don't know. Lan he's all man. Yes. He's every man. He's a bunch of men. Yeah,
Daniel Henney.
Yes, exactly. So Bran is like, maybe she does the lightning thing. Maybe she can heal, Yeah. And Rand is a little reluctant because he's just grown up hearing stories about how Aes Sedai are kind of like witches and tricksters, and they're not really good people in, the way that he sees them. But really, he has no choice. So he goes to Moraine and is like, hey, can you heal my dad? And she's like, hey, you've been having weird dreams? And he's like, what?
Do what?
Because yes, actually he has. But after that, she's like, yeah, okay, let's go off and see about healing your dad.
I feel like Moraine is tired this entire book. Just always ugh.
Right. Yeah, good call. Yeah, Moraine is like a mom with 7 kids under 7, is
right.
Yeah, the whole time.
There's nobody there to heal her. He should just included just one more Aes Sedai, which, might happen in the show. It sounds like.
Yeah, could.
Seems
all
likely.
Right.
Yeah, it seems possible anyway.
Chapter 8 is called A Place of Safety. They show up where Tam is, and Tom's there, and he's like, and leaves. And Lan's like, I don't trust that guy. Bran's also there. Moraine's like, hey, I need the room to get my magics on.
Right.
Lan notices the sword that Tam and Rand have, and he's like, hey, what?
I recognize that sword, or that particular mark on that sword.
And that's a pretty good deal. And so of course Rand doesn't actually even know where it came from.
Moraine says, wish we had brought a whole bunch of Aes Sedai if I'd known there was going to be some shadow spawn here. All I brought was my trusty staff.
Right.
Apparently ravens are just awful, evil creatures.
Right, yeah.
Which is sad because in reality they're very curious birds. And they're known for collecting shiny things.
And quite helpful, actually, to the ecosystem, as most birds are, really.
Yeah, they're smart. They're some of the smartest animals, actually. They're almost as smart as dolphins and apes and stuff. They're right behind them. They're smarter than parrots. I was reading about that the other day.
Somewhere here, Moraine takes out an Angreal, which is something that helps enhance her ability to channel.
Lovely trinket.
Yes, it's a small little kind of statue type figurine thingy. Yeah, she just holds it, and I guess it makes her more powerful. At some point, she also mentions that while it looked like everything was being attacked haphazardly, that there may have actually been more kind of a targeting happening. And anyway, because of how things were targeted, she thinks that the Trollocs were actually after
Boys.
Matt and Perrin, who were all born around the same time.
Right.
Maybe they're coming after somebody of a particular age that they thought was important.
Right.
And so, Rand's like, whatever, why would they come after me?
I'm just a farm boy.
Yeah.
I'm just a moisture farmer.
So Rand stays with his father after Moraine has done all she can to help heal him. So after a while, he just kind of drifts off to sleep, even though he had vowed to stay awake until his father woke up. That's where we end up in chapter 9.
He's had a long night. And at one point, I think Land tells him that the rider was a Myrddraal, which is a type of shadow spawn, and that's where I was getting to earlier when I said that this is not something a Myrddraal would do, just like sit and watch from a distance, and also it would be really obvious because they have like maggot-like eyeless faces,
right?
So it would be a lot more obvious.
Yeah, they do not
a monster.
They do not look human.
Not at all. No.
So yeah, it would be a little evident that it wasn't just some dude out on the road.
Right. Like, that's a monster over there, sir.
Yes.
Anyway.
Which would be even freakier, and I'll be curious to see if they represent it. Like,
I know, yeah. Like, I do want to see how this is handled. This is a good example of like, how is the show going to do this? Because it's a little bit harder to imagine.
Right.
Visual format.
And since Rafe, the showrunner, he's said, what they're trying to do is represent the entire series, not just adapting like Eye of the World.
Yeah.
So I could see them going more with the way that we know Myrddraal to look and act, and somehow. And
I'm just imagining a Myrddraal just like sticking its head out from behind a tree and then like pull it back in really quick. The voice, like rotting leaves, I think is mentioned at one point.
Oh my goodness!
I want to hear the rotting leaves.
Yeah. Next, we are on to Chapter 9, Tellings of the Wheel, where despite his efforts, Rand has fallen asleep, and he is dreaming a bunch of crazy stuff, blood red sun and black mountain, and
I always end up skipping over these dreams. There's a bunch of these dream sequences, and it's just like, okay, all right, you're probably telling me something important, but I don't care because it's dreams.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not important at all.
Right. As we go forward, like, dreams become different.
They definitely do.
And so there is one way in which you could ask some questions as if you're doing a reread about this, that you're like, I wonder. But yeah, at this point, you're just like, I don't know what's going on. And in the middle of the dream, he hears a voice that's like, serve me. And so you're like, okay, yeah, bad guy, wants him, to serve him. We get that.
Cartoonishly bad, really. I'm going to say this particular villain, I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say there are multiple villains in the Wheel of Time series.
Right.
It's a lot of books. And this is maybe the most transparently, cartoonishly evil of them. Right.
Again, I think, he was really wanting at this point in the series for it to feel like, like Sauron.
Right. Yep.
And so I think that's why we end up with this guy.
That's a good point.
Rand wakens suddenly from, having these terrible dreams, and he realizes that there's some fresh food there. He eats because he's hungry, because he's didn't even eat
since like yesterday, since the TV dinner. Maybe even didn't eat the TV dinner. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, and plus it was like that Boston Market meatloaf kind of stuff. So,
right.
Anyway, Land shows up, and he's like, "Hey, you're leaving." Yeah, and so you better say your goodbyes quickly, because there may be trouble.
Right.
And so Rand begins to unbuckle that sword belt, but Tam's like, no, you might want to hang on to that for this trip.
Sure. And Tam should know, and this is a little bit more of that context, Tam should know what that sword means, and that, maybe having that sword could cause more harm than good.
Right.
And maybe give him a different sword, Tam, or maybe tell him to buy a sword. I mean, maybe there's not a lot of swords in Emond's Field, but, this causes him some difficulties.
Yeah.
And I mean,
So
our boy has plot armor. I will say that.
yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, Moraine's like at this point downstairs. There's a group of people that are trying to stop her and everything. So she gets the crowd's full attention by twirling her staff. Her staff. I don't know. Kind of reminds me of Gandalf or something. I don't know. She says something about how it's terrible.
Gray.
Yes. Moraine the Blue, right? She says it's terrible how this is what Aemon's blood has come to. Aemon, Aemon.
Not to be confused with Aemon Targaryen.
that name is where Emond's Field comes from, apparently. So there was somebody way back in the history of this world, and this is where she explains that this is where there was once a great city called Manetheren. And now we're boys from Manetheren ourselves. We grew up straight out of Manetheren. It's actually one of the elements that I think is cool because it's not like a huge big deal.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of color almost.
Yeah, that helps to kind of explain why people from the Two Rivers, there is something a little different about them. There's this idea that there is this bloodline of great warriors, great actually channelers, and things like that. And she's kind of talking about that a little bit. After Manetheren fell in something called the Trolloc Wars, the memory was all but lost. And so they are the descendants, these people in the Two Rivers, of Manetheren.
Right.
After Moraine tells all this, they're like, "Oh, okay, you're all right, I guess." And just
forget about all that other stuff we said.
So yeah, and Lan pulls Rand and Matt over and says, "All right, let's head to the stables because we're about to skip town." And we are on to chapter 10.
Chapter 10.
Leave taking. You know what? I bet they're going to leave.
Take something.
It's funny how on the nose all of these chapter titles are in comparison to like where we are now, where if you go like 7 books forward, none of the chapter titles hardly tell you anything about what.
Sometimes you'll read the chapter title especially doing a reread and be like, oh, this is about this group of people that I really think is cool, and it's not about that group of people in any way, shape, or form. Not really. No. Yeah. And then the next chapter might be about it, and then it's like, well, I felt dumb for gushing about it in that chapter.
In this chapter called Leave Taking,
we're taking some leaves. We're going to take them out to the road so that the garbage man can pick them up.
Right. So the Myrddraal can, let them rot so they can.
Now I'm imagining Myrddraal wearing the little vests, getting on the back of the garbage truck and riding. Everybody's got to work.
Exactly. So yes. So Perrin shows up because Lan and Moraine also want him to come with them. They're like, hey, you need to go. They've all been convinced that they need to leave to keep everybody safe from whatever was hunting them. So Perrin, though, has an axe strapped to his belt. Pretty
axe. Or maybe more Gimli. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, maybe like halfway between Gimli and
sure.
Sam. Matt has brought a bow, and so yeah, you
they're all Legolas. Everyone from Emond's Field is Legolas. pretty much,
yeah. So Matt and Perrin say that they left notes for their family since Moraine asked them not to tell anyone they were leaving. Rand straight up talked to Tam, and Moraine's like, "Ugh."
He's like, "I didn't get that memo. Sorry."
And
it's been a rough day. Been buried in paperwork for the last 72 hours.
Lan has bought some horses, and around this time, Tom shows up, and he's like, "I believe I shall accompany you." and Egwene's like, "I want to come too." And
I'm like, "What? We did not talk to you at all."
And she's just like, I just want to come. And so she jumps on Bella, the most important character in the series. Bella, the Shaggy Mare.
Indeed.
So it's just very important. She finally, really gets some time. Now, technically, I think she was in the beginning, but this is when she finally really gets some time to shine. So yeah, so Egwene is writing Bella. It's just hugely important. And in case you can't tell, I'm joking.
Kinda. I mean,
kinda. Yeah. Yeah, keep listening. There's a theory that's kind of funny about Bella.
Yeah, you can Google Bella and just go down a rabbit's hole. I mean,
yeah, it's pretty great. So they leave the stable. They head out of town, and the sky's dark. Everything's going cool. When suddenly a Draghkar comes out of nowhere and starts to chase them. Tom says it's a kind of shadow spawn.
It's a mixture between a dragon and a car. It looks like a dog. It's just a Mustang with giant leathery wings.
That would actually be terrifying. Like legit, if you were walking through just like out at night and you saw a just full on like a Honda Civic but with wings coming after you,
I'm going home.
What's the movie? Christine. Christine.
Yeah.
Christine is the name of that. Yeah. So like imagine Christine but with wings. All right. So now that we've that's totally not what it is. Like we've really gone off on this rabbit trail.
Yeah, it definitely what it is. Yeah.
We move into chapter 11 as they're running away from the Draghkar.
Pterodactyl.
Yes,
but not. At this point, I was certainly picturing a pterodactyl. I mean,
yeah,
have a whole lot to go off of.
I was picturing like the man bat from Batman,
which is like much more accurate. Yeah,
yeah. They flee from the Draghkar. They reach another town in the Two Rivers called Watch Hill in record time, and apparently they didn't get attacked by Trollocs because there's like Beltane going on. The Draghkar is still chasing them. The crowd panics. There's this whole scene. This is the exact kind of thing that probably won't make it into the TV show, even though it would be a great scene.
Sure.
Eventually, they get to another town in the Two Rivers as they're kind of...
I'll just say here, Rand, I didn't realize, I'd forgotten that Rand had a different horse at this point. And this horse, Cloud, is kind of garbage.
Yeah.
He like runs off at one point. It's just not a good horse.
Yeah, he's driving an 82 Cloud. Yeah, it's not just last year's model.
If they pull a Romeo and Juliet in this show, I'm going to be real mad. Everybody has guns instead of swords. DiCaprio shows up.
Oh man, yeah. Anyway, they managed to escape the Draghkar. They reach Tarn Ferry. They go to the local ferryman, a guy named Master Hightower, who's not important, but he's been cast, so he's gonna be in the the show.
Weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Like by name, there's somebody cast as Master Hightower. So so the ferryman is in this. He's like, I never cross at night. And then Land's like, have you considered gold? And he's like, I shall cross at night. Tarn Ferry people apparently are known for being kind of sketchy. I think there's a joke here, something like if you shake hands with a Tarn ferryman, then you count your fingers afterwards or something like that, which I always thought was kind of funny.
I Googled Tarn Ferry and there's like a bunch of pictures from the comic. Now I kind of want to read the comic. Listeners, if you've read the comic book of Eye of the World, let us know what you think about it because I'm kind of curious. I have never read it.
I've got it's several volumes, of course, but I have them, and they're great.
You've read them, okay?
Yeah, I have. You didn't know that? I thought we talked about this.
I probably have forgotten.
I have them. They're sitting over here. On to
chapter 12.
Chapter 12, Across the Tarn, which is one of the two rivers, the titular two rivers.
Right. There are so many rivers. So many rivers. There's a lot of rivers.
Yes.
We're always at a river. Have you not? Like, it's a constant thing. There's always a river.
It is kind of funny that this region came to be known as the Two Rivers because there are so many rivers. It's like that's not really.
There's like a dozen rivers.
Yeah, there's not really that's not really a defining thing, man. Like every region could be called like the Two Rivers, the Five Rivers.
Right, I guess you can thank Lews Therin for breaking the world and making a bunch of rivers. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah, the Two Rivers. I think the other ones like I want to say like White River or something like that.
There's the Eldar. There's the Arenell. There's the.
Well, I'm just saying of the two rivers.
Oh, sorry, gotcha.
Yeah, the Tarn and the White River, maybe. I don't know.
Mesopotamia.
Yes. The
Tigris. I was trying to think of Tigris in the Euphrates. So I just thought
in the Tigris and the Euphrates. There you go.
The Mesopotamian River. Yeah.
Yeah. Something that I feel like we should say, if in case this, if it's not obvious, Sam and I are not huge buffs on all the lore of this because there's so much.
Not at all.
We can't know everything. And so there are people who will write in and correct us, and we don't mind it a bit. We will stand corrected if we say something that is completely off and you notice it, which we probably already have said something inaccurate in this episode.
Feel free to correct me on Battletech lore. I don't mind.
Or if you're like, hey, I actually read the pronunciation in the back of the book and it's different than you're saying, it's because I'm largely going off the audiobooks, which sometimes are different than what is in the glossary.
And if you tell us, we will correct ourselves for at least an episode or two, and then we will forget again.
Right.
We'll listen to the audiobook again, and we'll hear Kramer and Redding say something. And
Is it Mogideon or Mogadine? I don't know. Anyway. So, yes. On to chapter 12, Across the Terran. I bet they're going to cross the Terran.
Yeah. Is it a Tauran warrior? Is it a Tauran druid?
I don't know. They get to the other side, and then they head on towards Barrelon. And, again, they hear a Draghkar screams. Alan listens and is like, nah, it's searching the river. We got him fooled for the time being.
I know that at one point Moraine talks to Egwene about how the true source is all around us. It surrounds us.
It penetrates us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
the Force. It's the Force. Anyway, so she's gonna be a Jedi.
Right. Yeah. She's like, this is the point at which you're like, hey, Egwene, you have the inborn ability to channel. And even if you hadn't been taught how, you would eventually have found that ability, which is pretty good that I found you, because a lot of times people who
doesn't end well if they do.
Yeah, they die or accidentally burn themselves out or hurt other people. So then Egwene's like, oh, sweet, I'm going to be an Aes Sedai. And
I was looking for something I wanted to be, and now I found it.
You may have been wondering why I was on this journey with everybody at that point.
We were all wondering that.
Yes. And at this point, yeah, you are. You're kind of like,
what are you doing?
Yeah, why is she here? But anyway, then you're like, oh, okay.
There were no ladies in the Fellowship of the Ring that were
So, and that, by the way, is why I mentioned the business about Manetheren. If you're like, oh, spoilers about Manetheren. No, I'm trying to give you a reason why there actually is some background that explains why it just so happens that Egwene can channel. And which, gosh, where is it actually explained that about ta'veren? Has that already happened, or did we?
You can go ahead, though. I mean, we're going to get through this book, so
here's the thing. At some point in this book, and I can't remember if it's happened already. If you've just read it, then you're going to be like, yeah, it's happened already, or no, it hasn't happened, or whatever. We find out that Mat, Perrin, and Rand are all three what's called ta'veren.
It's a really brilliant approach to plot armor, and generally just plot.
Right. And on the one hand, you can look at it and say, oh, it's kind of lame because it explains why everything always works out for them.
It's what Jon Snow really needed.
But on the other hand, you're like, oh, that's actually really brilliant writing, because it actually does explain why everything works out for them. A little bit, there's an element of the Force here too, by the way, because the idea is that in the kind of religion of the Wheel of Time world, the idea is that the wheel is weaving together and in what called the pattern. And so the pattern has all of us in it. We're all part of the pattern. We're all weaving in and weaving out and doing all our thing. Well, ta'veren have this ability to have the pattern weave around them such that it can help them out, help them towards kind of their destiny, so to speak, where they need to go. So what you're going to find out is that these three boys things in the plot seem to work out for them, which is common in fantasy books, especially. It's kind of a trope, the chosen one kind of, or the heroes or whatever. It seems like the plot just works for them. And you're kind of like, oh, really? Well, the way they explain it is that the pattern, the kind of the universe, as it were, is kind of on their side. And so they have some ability to make things work out in a way. And so we're going to see that play out. And the way that it's explained, it actually does help kind of defend, as Sam says, plot armor. That happens. So that's just one last thought I wanted to have before we end this episode.
We would love for you to check out our website at tsmpodcast.com. We're also available on all the socials at Podcast TSM. That's not TSM Podcast. That's Podcast TSM. If you check TSM Podcast, you'll get Thriving Sexy Marriage, which is an important thing too. But not us. Leave us a review, rating on all of your, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd appreciate that. If you say something nice, we'll mention you on the air. And until next time, Tai'Shar and Etherin.